The Boeing 737 hummed at 35,000 feet, a metal cocoon suspended between earth and sky. Sunlight sliced through oval windows, casting geometric shadows across worn blue seats. Most passengers dozed or scrolled through phones, lulled by the engine's monotonous drone. Then a voice shattered the calm. "Excuse me." "Excuse me. I said I need service." The words carried the sharp edge of impatience amplified by entitlement. Heads turned towards seat 4A. A man in his 50s leaned into the aisle, one hand snapping fingers like he was summoning a dog. His charcoal suit looked expensive. His expression looked practiced. Maya Robinson emerged from the forward galley, her burgundy uniform pressed to perfection. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd walked these narrow aisles for a decade. Her name tag caught the light. Her smile was professional, warm, unshakable. "How can I help you, sir?" "Finally." He didn't look at her face. "Get my bag down." The black one overhead. Maya glanced up at the compartment. "Of course. Is it the—" Did I stutter? His eyes finally met hers, cold and assessing. "The black bag, now." She reached up smoothly, muscles accustomed to the stretch. The bag was heavier than expected. She lowered it carefully, placing it beside his seat. "Here you are. Anything else?" He unzipped it roughly, rummaged through contents. "This isn't it. I'm sorry, sir. That was the only black bag in your compartment." "Then you got the wrong one." His voice rose a notch. "Typical. Can't even follow simple instructions." Passengers in nearby rows shifted uncomfortably. A woman in 5C pretended to read her magazine with sudden intensity. Maya's smile tightened imperceptibly at the corners. "Let me check again, sir. Don't bother." He shoved the bag toward her with his foot. "Just get someone competent to help me. Someone who actually belongs in first class." The air changed. Maya froze mid-reach. The words hung there, sharp and unmistakable. A teenage girl in 12B gasped audibly. The businessman in 8C looked up from his laptop, expression unreadable. "Sir, I'd be happy to—" "I don't take orders from people like you." Each word was a small detonation. "To know your place." Maya's hand trembled slightly before her fingers curled into steadiness. She straightened, shoulders back, chin level. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Grace under pressure, baby girl. Always grace." "I'll send my supervisor," she said quietly. As she turned toward the galley, she allowed herself one brief glance toward the cockpit door. It remained closed, silent, keeping its secrets. For now. The man in 4A smirked, settling back into his leather seat like a king dismissing a servant. He had no idea what was coming. 3 hours earlier, morning light had filtered through Maya Robinson's kitchen window in soft golden streaks. She'd stood at the counter, smoothing wrinkles from her uniform with practiced hands. The burgundy fabric was crisp from the dry cleaner. The ivory scarf at her collar tied in the regulation knot. She could do blindfolded. Her apartment was small, but carefully maintained. Family photos lined the hallway. Her daughter Zoe smiled from a frame by the coffee maker, gap-toothed and radiant in her soccer uniform. 8 years old. Smart as lightning. The reason Maya kept going when flights got difficult. 10 years, she'd whispered to her reflection in the bathroom mirror. 10 years and still standing. The reflection showed a woman of 34 who looked both younger and older depending on the light. Smooth brown skin that refused to show exhaustion. Eyes that had seen too many Brennans but still chose kindness. Her father's vintage pilot wings were pinned inside her jacket, invisible to everyone but her. She touched them like a talisman. The drive to the airport had been uneventful. Traffic, coffee, NPR discussing midterm elections. Maya had studied for her commercial pilot's license exam during the commute. Aviation textbooks in the passenger seat. Night school was expensive, but the dream refused to die. Someday she'd walk through that cockpit door and stay there. In the crew briefing room, her colleague Jessica had joked about Mercury being in retrograde. Difficult passenger day, she'd predicted, laughing. Maya had laughed too, not knowing how right she'd be. The terminal hummed with its usual controlled chaos. Families with rolling suitcases, business travelers with AirPods and irritation. Maya checked passengers against the manifest, scanned boarding passes, offered genuine smiles to crying toddlers and stressed parents. Flight 2847 to Denver. Routine, ordinary, just another Thursday. She'd boarded early, checking emergency equipment with the precision her training demanded. Life vests, oxygen masks, fire extinguishers. Everything accounted for, everything ready. As passengers began boarding, Maya had positioned herself near the entrance with Jessica and Carlos, the head flight attendant. They greeted each person with rehearsed warmth. Most responded with nods or distracted thanks. Some didn't acknowledge them at all. Then Richard Brennan stepped aboard. Maya noticed three things immediately. Expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask alcohol on his breath, a first-class ticket held like a weapon, and eyes that looked through service workers as if they were furniture. "Welcome aboard," she'd said reflexively. He'd brushed past without responding. Already claiming his territory in foray, Maya had watched him settle in, something in her gut tightening with recognition. She'd met men like Brennan before. They boarded with chips on their shoulders and points to prove. Usually they just wanted control. Extra peanuts. Their specific drink. Attention. This time felt different. She'd shaken off the feeling, turned to greet the next passenger, a young mother with twin toddlers looking overwhelmed. Maya had helped stow their bags, found coloring books from the supply closet, made the woman smile with relief. "You're a lifesaver," the mother had whispered. Maya had smiled back. That's literally the job description. If only she'd known how literal that would become. Richard Brennan was a man who measured his worth by how quickly others obeyed him. He'd built his construction company through intimidation and shrewd contract negotiations. He donated to the right political campaigns, belonged to the right clubs, and believed deeply in an unspoken hierarchy where people knew their place. The flight attendant was in his way. "You deaf or something?" He spoke loudly enough for rows 2-6 to hear clearly. "I said get my bag," the one in the overhead. Not rocket science. Maya had already explained that she'd retrieved the only black bag from his compartment. She kept her voice professional, soothing. "Sir, if you could describe your bag more specifically, I'd be happy to check neighboring bins. It's black, leather, has wheels." He articulated each word like she was slow. "How hard is this?" A bead of sweat formed at Maya's temple, despite the cabin's cool air. She reached up again, checking the compartment thoroughly. 3 bags, 1 gray hardshell, 1 navy duffel, 1 brown leather briefcase. "Sir, I don't see another black-wheeled bag here. Could it have been gate-checked?" "Don't tell me what could have happened." Brennan's face flushed. "You probably gave it to someone else." "Incompetent doesn't even begin to cover it." Jessica appeared from the galley, sensing trouble. "Is everything all right here?" "No, everything's not all right." Brennan gestured dismissively at Maya. "She can't locate a simple bag. I need someone who actually knows what they're doing." Jessica's expression hardened. "Maya is one of our most experienced. I don't care about her resume." He cut her off, eyes still on Maya. "I care about getting my property." "Or is that too much to ask from you people?" The phrase landed like a slap. "You people." Maya felt the cabin temperature drop. Or maybe it was just her blood. Passengers were openly staring now. The teenage girl in 12B had her phone halfway out before her mother's hand clamped on her wrist, pulling it down. "Sir!" Maya's voice remained steady through sheer force of will. "I will personally check every overhead compartment on this aircraft. But I need you to speak to me respectfully." Brennan laughed. Actually laughed. "Respectfully? You want respect? Earn it. Do your job right for once. Better yet, get me someone who actually belongs in first class. Someone who speaks English as a first language. Someone who—" "That's enough." Jessica stepped between them. "Sir, you need to lower your voice. I'll use whatever voice I want." Brennan stood now, all 6 feet of him towering over both women. I paid $800 for this ticket. I know people at corporate. The CEO is a personal friend. One phone call and both of you will be working at a car wash where you belong." The businessman in 8C chuckled quietly, just loud enough to be heard. Maya's hands curled into fists at her sides. 10 years of training, of enduring, of choosing dignity over defense, pressed against her ribs like a caged animal. "I'll find your bag, sir," she said through gritted teeth. "Please sit down. Don't tell me what to do." His voice dropped to something crueler, quieter. "You don't give orders to men like me. You take them. That's how this works. That's how it's always worked. And if you don't like it, there's plenty of jobs where you won't have to see people like us." The cabin held its collective breath. Maya turned away before anyone could see her eyes fill. She walked toward the aft galley, each step measured and controlled. Her father's wings pressed against her ribs, cold metal through fabric. Behind her, Brennan settled back into his seat with a satisfied grunt. "Finally," he muttered, "some peace." The teenager in 12B mouthed one word to her mother. Wrong, but nobody said it out loud. The aft galley was barely 6 feet of cramped space. But Maya folded herself into its corner, like she was hiding from artillery fire. Her hands gripped the metal counter, knuckles pale against brown skin. The cabin noise faded to white static. "You people know your place. You don't belong." The words looped through her mind, each repetition adding weight. She'd heard versions of them before, whispered, implied, coded in polite language. But Brennan's naked contempt was different. It was permission, a declaration that masks could come off. Jessica appeared in the galley entrance, face tight with anger. "Maya, I'm so sorry. That was completely... I'm fine." Maya's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I've handled worse. You shouldn't have to handle it at all." Jessica's hand found Maya's shoulder. "Carlos is calling the captain. We can have him removed and cause a scene." Maya shook her head. "You know how it works. Passengers complain. Corporate investigates. We're the ones who end up in HR explaining why we couldn't de-escalate. Why we made the passenger uncomfortable." Jessica opened her mouth to argue but couldn't. They both knew the truth. Maya closed her eyes, reaching for the center her father had taught her to find. "They'll test you, baby girl. They'll push and poke and try to make you small. But you're a Robinson. You stand tall even when they demand you kneel." Her father had said that the week before he died. Heart attack at 52. Too young, too sudden. He'd never made it to captain himself, held back by an era that kept black pilots in co-pilot seats, no matter their hours. But he'd loved flying with the passion of someone who knew what it meant to fight. For the sky, Maya wore his wings because she'd promised to finish what he'd started. The call button chimed, sharp, insistent. Maya's eyes snapped open. "Seat 4A, Jessica read from the panel. "Of course it is. I'll go." Maya straightened her uniform, tucked a loose strand of hair back into her regulation bun. Her reflection in the galley's metal surface looked like a warrior suiting up for battle. "You don't have to," Jessica said quietly. "Yes." Maya turned toward the aisle. "I do." She walked back into the cabin with her spine straight and her chin level. Passengers tracked her movement with the morbid fascination of people watching someone walk toward disaster. The gold cross at her neck caught the overhead light, gleaming like a small promise. Maya's father, James Robinson, had been 7 years old when he saw his first airplane. A crop duster rattling over Alabama cotton fields, trailing white smoke against blue sky. Something in his small chest had cracked open, letting in light and longing. "I'm gonna fly," he'd told his grandmother. She'd smiled sadly, knowing the world didn't make space for black boys with wings. But James Robinson refused to be grounded. He'd joined the Air Force at 18, learned maintenance first, then navigation, then finally earned his pilot's license in 1968. The military needed pilots more than it needed prejudice. He'd flown transport missions, cargo runs, assignments that kept him far from glory but close to clouds. After his service, he'd applied to every commercial airline. Every single one. Rejections came on letterhead, polite and final. Not the right fit. Position filled. Perhaps another time. He'd worked as a flight instructor for 20 years, teaching white students who went on to become captains while he stayed on the ground. He'd never complained. Never let bitterness dim his passion. He just kept flying whenever he could, and told his daughter stories that made the sky sound like home. You could do it. Maya, he'd said when she was 12, watching planes take off from the airport observation deck, you could go further than I did. The doors are opening. Slowly, but they're opening. Maya had believed him because his eyes shone when he spoke. She'd studied aeronautics in high school, math and physics with focused intensity. College had been community classes paid for with waitressing tips. She'd gotten her private pilot's license at 22, her father in the right seat, tears streaming down his face when she landed smooth as silk. "That's my girl," he'd whispered. "That's my girl." 2 months later, his heart gave out. Maya had paused her training to survive. Single mother at 26, Zoe's father long gone. Bills and daycare and groceries demanded attention. Flying became something she did in dreams. The flight attendant job was supposed to be temporary. 6 months, maybe a year, until she saved enough to finish her commercial license. But life had a way of stretching temporary into permanent. 6 months became 2 years, became 5, became 10. Yet Maya never stopped studying. Night school, online courses, ground school on her days off. She'd taken every penny of overtime and funneled it into the dream her father had planted. The airlines were hiring more diverse pilots now. Initiatives, quotas, progress, dressed in PR language. Maya didn't care about the packaging. She just wanted the door open when she was finally ready to walk through. That cockpit door on this aircraft represented everything. Not just flight, not just career, but proof that James Robinson's daughter had finished what he'd started, that his dreams hadn't died with him. She touched the vintage wings pinned inside her jacket. 4 gold bars. Captain's insignia from an era when her father never got to wear them on active duty. "I'm still climbing, Daddy," she whispered to the empty galley. "I'm still climbing." The turbulence hit without warning, jolting the aircraft. The seatbelt sign dinged on, bright orange and insistent. Time to face Brennan again. The turbulence wasn't severe, just enough to rattle glasses and send a few stomachs lurching. Maya moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, checking overhead bins, ensuring passenger compliance with seatbelt signs. Seat 4A remained a problem. "I want a scotch." Brennan didn't ask. He demanded. Neat, now. Maya kept her voice professional. "Sir, we can't serve alcohol during turbulence. Once the seatbelt sign is off, I don't care about your signs." He waved dismissively. "Get me a drink or get me someone who will." Other passengers watched with the uncomfortable silence of witnesses who'd rather be anywhere else. The businessman in 8C nodded slightly, as if agreeing with Brennan's logic. A woman in 6B buried her face in her Kindle. "It's FAA regulation, sir." "I can't?" Brennan leaned forward. "Or won't. Big difference. You people always have excuses. Always hiding behind rules when you just don't want to work." The businessman in 8C chuckled. "She's probably not allowed to serve anyone. Liability." It wasn't support. It was gasoline on fire. Maya's jaw tightened. "Sir, once we're through this turbulence, I'll be happy to serve you. But federal law prohibits..." "Federal law?" Brennan's laugh was ugly. "You probably can't even spell federal. What are you, high school dropout? Couldn't cut it at McDonald's, so they stuck you here?" A mother 2 rows back covered her child's ears. "I have 10 years of service with this airline," Maya said quietly. "And I'm asking you respectfully to comply with safety regulations. 10 years of incompetence doesn't make you qualified." Brennan stood despite the seatbelt sign, swaying slightly in the aisle. "You want respect? You want to be treated like you matter? Then prove you can do more than push a cart and whine about regulations." His breath smelled like the minibar in whatever hotel he'd left that morning. His eyes held the cruel certainty of a man who'd never been told no by someone he considered beneath him. "When I get off this plane," he continued, voice rising, "I'm making calls. You'll be scrubbing toilets by next week. If you're lucky. More likely you'll be unemployed, on the street where you probably came from anyway. You and your little friend with the accent." Jessica, watching from the galley, went rigid. Maya felt something crack inside her chest. Not fear, not even anger anymore. Something colder, clearer. She looked past Brennan toward the front of the cabin. The cockpit door was slightly ajar, not wide, just enough. A sliver of space where shadow moved. Someone was listening. Maya's pulse steadied. Her breathing slowed. The turbulence passed as quickly as it came, and the seatbelt sign dinged off with mechanical indifference. She reached into her pocket, fingers finding the small call button device crew members carried. She pressed it 3 times in quick succession. Short, deliberate code. The intercom crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." The voice was calm, measured, carrying the authority of someone who controlled 100 tons of metal at 35,000 feet. "We'll be making an unscheduled announcement shortly. All passengers please remain seated. Flight attendants prepare for announcement." Brennan smirked. "Great. Now your captain's going to apologize for your behavior." "This should be good." Maya said nothing. She stepped back into the galley, making space in the aisle. The cockpit. Door swung fully open. Footsteps approached, steady, unhurried. The sound of someone who'd walked this aisle 1,000 times and owned every inch of it. Maya's heart hammered against her. Ribs the footsteps stopped at row. She allowed herself a small, tight smile. Now, she thought. Now you'll see. Carlos emerged from the cockpit, his head flight attendant uniform crisp and authoritative. 20 years of service showed in the way he carried himself, confident but diplomatic, trained to de-escalate the impossible. "Mr. Brennan." Carlos's voice carried practiced warmth. "I understand there's been some tension. I'd like to offer a solution." Brennan crossed his arms, skeptical but willing to listen to another man. "Finally, someone with sense. We can move you to a different section with enhanced service." Carlos gestured toward the rear cabin. "Complimentary upgrades on beverages, early deplaning privileges." It was the corporate playbook. Appease the angry customer. Protect the staff by removing the problem. Everyone walks away claiming victory. That's more like it. Brennan's smirk returned. "See?" He glanced at Maya, who stood silently by the galley. "That's how professionals handle things. No attitude. No excuses." Carlos nodded, already moving to collect Brennan's belongings. For a moment, the cabin relaxed. Passengers returned to their screens and magazines. The teenage girl in 12B looked disappointed, like she'd been promised a movie and got commercials instead. Maya felt the familiar weight of swallowed rage. This was how it always ended. The aggressor got rewards. The victim got trauma and a reminder to smile harder next time. "Appreciate you handling this," Brennan said to Carlos, loud enough for surrounding rows to hear. "These young ones, they don't know how to treat customers right. Need more training or better screening processes." Carlos's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but he nodded. "Let's get you settled, sir." As they moved toward the back, Brennan paused beside Maya. "No hard feelings," he said with false magnanimity. "Just remember, customer service is a skill. Some people have it, others—" He shrugged meaningfully. The businessman in 8C chuckled again. "Guy's not wrong." Maya's fingernails dug into her palms. Jessica touched her elbow in silent solidarity. The cabin returned to its mechanical hum, the incident already fading into the background noise of air travel, but the cockpit door remained open, and the footsteps that had started earlier hadn't stopped. A figure emerged fully into the aisle. Not Carlos. Someone else, taller, wearing a uniform with 4 gold stripes on the shoulders, the captain, Mr. Brennan. The voice carried the same calm authority from the intercom, but now it filled the physical space with undeniable presence. "I need you to return to your original seat." Brennan turned, irritation flickering across his face. "Look, your flight attendant already sorted this out. I'm moving to—" "No." The word was quiet but absolute. "You're not." The cabin went silent. Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at the front of the aircraft like a wall made of regulation and resolve. Her uniform was immaculate. Her expression was unreadable. Her presence commanded attention without demanding it. "Sir, return to seat 4A immediately." Her voice never rose, never wavered. "We need to have a conversation." Brennan's face shifted from confusion to indignation. "Excuse me. I was just moved by your crew. I'm a paying passenger. I have rights. You do." Captain Mitchell stepped closer, closing the distance with measured steps. "And so does my flight attendant. The one you've been harassing for the past 40 minutes. The word harassing landed like a gavel. Passengers who'd been pretending not to listen suddenly found reasons to look up. Phones stayed in pockets, but ears were tuned to every syllable. Harassing? Brennan laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I asked for service. Basic service. She couldn't deliver. That's not harassment, that's incompetence." "You called her you people." Captain Mitchell's voice remained level. "You told her she didn't belong in first class. You threatened her job and made racial comments. 17 passengers heard you. 3 have already filed witness statements through the in-flight app." Brennan's face reddened. "I never said anything racial. I complained about poor service. That's my right as a customer. You said, and I quote from the flight attendant call recording." Captain Mitchell pulled out a small device, pressed play. Brennan's voice crackled through tiny speakers, tinny but unmistakable. "You don't give orders to men like me. You take them. That's how this works." The cabin collectively inhaled. Brennan's mouth opened and closed. "That's—" "Context matters." She was being difficult. She was following FAA regulations. Captain Mitchell's eyes were steady. "Which, as captain of this aircraft, I'm obligated to enforce. You refused compliance with seatbelt signs. You demanded alcohol during turbulence. You verbally abused crew members. Any one of those is grounds for federal charges." "Federal charges." Brennan's laugh turned sharp with panic. "Over a complaint? This is ridiculous. I know your CEO. One phone call—" "Go ahead." Captain Mitchell pulled out her phone, held it toward him. "Call him. His name's David Chen. We went to flight school together. I'm sure he'd love to hear how you threatened his staff and violated federal aviation regulations." "I'll wait." Brennan's hand froze halfway to the phone. The businessman in 8C suddenly became very interested in his laptop screen. "Here's what's going to happen," Captain Mitchell continued. "You're going to sit down. You're going to remain silent for the duration of this flight. And when we land, federal air marshals will be waiting to take your statement. Depending on their assessment, you may face fines up to $35,000 and possible jail time." "This is insane." Brennan's voice cracked. "Over a misunderstanding. It stopped being a misunderstanding when you said, 'Know your place' to a flight attendant with 10 years of exemplary service." Captain Mitchell's voice finally carried an edge. "When you used her race as a weapon. When you made every person in this cabin complicit in your cruelty by forcing them to watch." The teenage girl in 12B whispered to her mother. "I recorded some of it." "Send it to the airline," her mother whispered back. Loud enough to be heard. Brennan looked around the cabin, searching for allies. He found 40 pairs of eyes looking away. The businessman in 8C had somehow become invisible. "Sit down, Mr. Brennan." Captain Mitchell gestured to 4A. "Last warning." Brennan sat. His hands trembled slightly as he fastened his seatbelt. Captain Mitchell turned toward the galley where Maya stood, frozen in disbelief. Their eyes met, and Maya's breath caught in recognition. The vintage wings on the captain's uniform. 4 gold bars, the same design as the ones pinned inside Maya's jacket. Captain Mitchell smiled slightly, a private expression that lasted only a second. Then she turned back to the cabin, professional mask restored. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the disruption. We'll be landing in Denver in approximately 90 minutes. Thank you for your patience and cooperation. She walked back toward the cockpit, pausing briefly beside Maya. Your father would be proud, she murmured, so quiet only Maya could hear. James Robinson was one of the finest pilots I ever knew. Maya's world tilted. Captain Mitchell disappeared into the cockpit. The door closed with a soft final click. Maya stood in the galley, her father's wings suddenly burning against her chest like they'd caught fire. How? She thought. How does she, Jessica, appeared at her elbow? Maya, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maya couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what had just happened. In seat 4A, Richard Brennan stared at his hands, his face pale and drawn. The cabin remained silent, and the plane flew on toward Denver, carrying secrets and reckonings in equal measure. The remaining 90 minutes felt like 90 years. Maya moved through her duties on autopilot, collecting trash, offering drinks, checking seatbelts for landing prep. But her mind was elsewhere, spinning through impossible connections. Your father would be proud. James Robinson was one of the finest pilots I ever knew. Captain Sarah Mitchell couldn't be more than 45. She would have been young when Maya's father died. How did they know each other? Why had he never mentioned her? Jessica tried to engage her in conversation, but Maya could only manage single-word responses. Her hands shook when she poured coffee. Her smile felt like it was made of paper. In seat 4A, Brennan sat rigid and silent. He'd stopped calling for service, stopped making eye contact. He stared at the seatback screen showing their flight path, watching the little airplane icon crawl toward Denver with agonizing slowness. Other passengers gave him a wide berth. The teenage girl in 12B had uploaded her video to the airline's incident portal. Word had spread through the cabin in whispers and text messages. A man in 15C had been live-tweeting the entire exchange. The hashtag TalkFlight2847 was already trending. Maya knew none of this yet. She was trapped in her own head, in the space between past and present where her father's memory lived. She remembered his funeral. The folded flag, the other pilots who'd attended, most of them white men who'd called James a credit to his people, like it was a compliment. She'd been so angry then, so hollowed out by grief, that rage was the only thing keeping her upright. None of those men had looked like Captain Mitchell. The descent began. The plane tilted gently, beginning its long glide toward Earth. Maya strapped into her jump seat, facing the cabin. Her eyes found the cockpit door. Closed, impenetrable. Who are you? She thought. And what did you know about my father that I don't? The landing gear deployed with a mechanical thunk. The runway appeared below, grey concrete ribboned with rubber marks. The wheels touched down smooth as silk, a perfect landing. The kind her father used to call kissing the ground goodnight. Maya closed her eyes against sudden tears. The jetway connected with a pressurized hiss. Passengers gathered belongings with the practiced chaos of people desperate to escape confinement. 2 federal air marshals appeared at the forward entrance, badges visible, expressions neutral. Mr. Richard Brennan. The taller marshal's voice carried authority without aggression. Please remain seated. Everyone else may deplane. Brennan's face had gone from red to grey. He nodded mutely. Maya stood by the exit, offering mechanical goodbyes as passengers filed past. Some smiled sympathetically. Others avoided her gaze, embarrassed by their earlier silence. The teenage girl from 12B paused. You were amazing, she whispered. The way you kept your cool. I want to be like that when I'm older. Maya managed a real smile. Be better. Be braver than I was. You were brave, the girl's mother added softly. Braver than any of us. They disappeared into the jet bridge. The cabin emptied until only Brennan, the marshals, Carlos, Jessica, and Maya remained. Captain Mitchell emerged from the cockpit, carrying her flight bag. She spoke briefly with the marshals, handed them a tablet with incident logs, answered questions with precise professionalism. She never looked at Maya. Brennan was escorted off the aircraft. His expensive suit wrinkled now, his shoulders hunched. As he passed Maya, he opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it. What was there to say? The marshal's voices faded down the jet bridge. Verbal assault, federal regulations, $35,000 fine. Carlos put a hand on Maya's shoulder. You did everything right, everything. I'm sorry I tried to move him. I thought it would de-escalate, but I know. Maya's voice sounded distant to her own ears. We all know how it works. Not anymore. Jessica's voice was fierce. Did you see Captain Mitchell? She eviscerated him, with facts and regulations and zero tolerance. That's how it should work. Maya nodded, but her attention was on Captain Mitchell, who was checking post-flight paperwork near the cockpit. Carlos and Jessica gathered their belongings, discussing the incident report they'd need to file. Maya waited, some instinct telling her to stay. To wait for the moment when it would just be her and the captain, alone. That moment came, the cabin emptied. The cleaning crew hadn't arrived yet. The airplane held its breath in the space between flights, no longer traveling, not yet reset for the next journey. Captain Mitchell looked up from her tablet. Maya Robinson, not a question, a statement of recognition. You look like him. Your father. Same eyes, same way of standing, like you're ready for anything. Maya's throat tightened. You knew him. I did. Captain Mitchell set down her tablet, gave Maya her full attention. I was his student 20 years ago, when I was trying to get my commercial license, and every door kept slamming in my face. Captain Mitchell gestured to the first row of seats. They sat, two women in airline uniforms, separated by 20 years and a shared legacy. I was 23, Captain Mitchell began. Military background, thousands of flight hours, impeccable record. Every airline turned me down. Not the right fit. We'll keep your resume on file. The usual lies. Maya listened, her heart hammering. I was giving up. Literally packing to move back home, when a friend told me about a flight instructor at the municipal airport. Said he was tough but fair, took on students nobody else wanted. Your father. The cabin lights hummed softly overhead. Outside, ground crew moved around the aircraft like ants around a sleeping giant. First day I showed him my logbook. He read every page. Then he looked at me and said, You're good enough to fly for any airline in this country. The question is whether you're strong enough to keep trying when they tell you no. Captain Mitchell's voice caught slightly. I told him I didn't know if I was. What did he say? Maya whispered. He said, Then I'll teach you to be. Captain Mitchell smiled, but her eyes were bright with memory. He trained me for 6 months. Refused payment, said the only thing he wanted was for me to promise that when I made it, not if but when, I'd pay it forward. Help the next person who needed a door opened. Maya's chest felt too small for her lungs. I applied to 43 airlines, got rejected by 42. The 43rd took a chance. I worked co-pilot routes for 8 years before making captain. Every single flight I carried your father's lesson. Grace under pressure, excellence without apology, and help others climb. He never told me. Maya's voice broke. About you, about any students he mentored. He wouldn't. Captain Mitchell's smile was sad and knowing. James wasn't the kind of man who needed credit for his good deeds. He just did them and moved on. A memory surfaced. Maya's father coming home late on Tuesday and Thursday nights, smelling like aviation fuel and satisfaction. Teaching someone to fly, he'd said when she asked. Just helping out. She'd been 10. She'd thought he meant ground school classes. He'd been changing lives. When I heard what happened today, Captain Mitchell's voice hardened. When Carlos called the cockpit and told me a passenger was racially harassing a flight attendant named Maya Robinson, I checked the crew manifest. Saw your file. Saw you're enrolled in commercial pilot training. Saw the note in your record. Father James Robinson, former military and civilian flight instructor. You came out because of him. Maya understood now. Because you owed him. No. Captain Mitchell's eyes were fierce. I came out because of you. Because you deserve someone to stand up for you the way your father stood up for me. The way he stood up for everyone who got told they didn't belong in the sky. Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. He died before I could finish my training. I've been trying for 10 years to get back to it. But life keeps, I know. Captain Mitchell pulled something from her flight bag. A business card. This is my personal number. Call me tomorrow. We're going to finish your training, free of charge. Every hour you need to get your commercial license. I'll fly with you. Maya stared at the card, her hands shaking too hard to take it properly. Your father told me something the day I got hired. Captain Mitchell's voice softened. He said, Sarah, you're not flying for yourself anymore. You're flying for everyone who got told no, everyone who got told they didn't belong. You carry us all with you now. She paused. It's your turn to fly, Maya. And when you do, you'll carry him with you. Finish what he started. Maya took the card with trembling fingers. Why are you doing this? Because 20 years ago, someone opened a door for me when everyone else was slamming them shut. Captain Mitchell stood, shouldered her flight bag. Your father changed my life. Let me help change yours. That's how this works. That's how we win. She extended her hand. Maya took it, feeling the calluses of a pilot who'd logged thousands of hours. The grip was firm, sure, full of promise. Welcome to the next chapter, First Officer Robinson. Captain Mitchell grinned. You're going to be incredible. She walked toward the exit, paused at the door. Oh, and Maya, that thing you did today, standing tall while someone tried to make you small, that's exactly what your father would have done. You're already flying. You just haven't left the ground yet. Then she was gone. Maya sat alone in the empty aircraft, her father's wings pressed against her chest and Captain Mitchell's card clutched in her hand. Outside, Denver's late afternoon sun painted the tarmac gold. 3 months later, Maya sat in the right seat of a small Cessna at 7,000 feet. Captain Mitchell was in the left seat, talking her through commercial pilot maneuvers with the same patient precision James Robinson had once used with a younger woman who needed someone to believe in her. Steeper bank, Captain Mitchell instructed. You're flying it, not suggesting to it. Commit. Maya adjusted her control input. The aircraft tilted smoothly into a perfect steep turn, maintaining altitude within 10 feet. Textbook precision. Beautiful. Captain Mitchell's voice carried pride. Again, other direction. They flew for 2 hours that Saturday morning. They'd been flying together every weekend since Denver. Ground school during weekday evenings. Simulator time when the airlines provided it. Maya's logbook was filling with hours, each one a step closer to the dream her father had planted. On the ground, Richard Brennan had pleaded guilty to interfering with flight crew members. His fine $35,000, plus mandatory anger management and implicit bias training. He'd lost his position on 2 corporate boards. His construction company had issued a public apology and donated $50,000 to aviation scholarships for underrepresented minorities. The viral video from Flight 2847 had sparked national conversation. Airlines updated training protocols. Zero-tolerance policies for discrimination were actually being enforced. It wasn't revolution, but it was movement. Maya's daughter Zoe had watched the news coverage with wide eyes. Mama, you're famous. No, baby. Maya had knelt to her level. I'm just someone who stood up when it was hard. That's not famous. That's just necessary. When you're a pilot, Zoe had asked, can I come fly with you? Every single day I'm allowed, Maya had promised. We'll go everywhere Grandpa James always wanted to fly. Now descending toward the municipal airport, where her father had once taught Captain Mitchell, Maya felt the circle completing. Landing gear down. Flaps configured. Airspeed perfect. The runway stretched ahead like a promise kept. Your airplane, Captain Mitchell said, relinquishing control. Bring us home. Maya guided the Cessna down with steady hands, her father's wings pinned to her flight suit. The wheels kissed the runway with barely a bump. Perfect landing. The kind James Robinson would have called poetry. "That's my girl," Captain Mitchell said softly. The same words James had once said. "That's my girl." Maya taxied to parking, shut down the engine, listened to the propeller tick as it cooled. In the sudden silence, she heard her father's voice like he was sitting in the back seat. "I told you that you could fly." "I told you, I know, Daddy." She smiled through tears. "I know." 6 months after Flight 2847, Maya Robinson passed her commercial pilot check ride on the first attempt. The examiner, a gruff man with 30 years of experience, shook her hand afterward and said, "Best performance I've seen in 5 years. You're a natural." "No," Maya had replied quietly. "I'm someone who had good teachers." Captain Sarah Mitchell pinned Maya's new wings onto her uniform personally. The ceremony was small. Just Zoe, Jessica, Carlos, and a few instructors from the flight school. But it felt bigger than a stadium full of strangers. "Your father's legacy lives on," Captain Mitchell said, stepping back to admire the wings. "Not just in you, but in everyone you'll inspire. Everyone who sees you in that cockpit and realizes they can do it too." Maya flew her first commercial route 3 weeks later. Co-pilot on a regional jet, the same airline where she'd worked as a flight attendant. Some of the passengers recognized her from the viral video. They asked for selfies at baggage claim, called her a hero. She smiled politely and declined. "I'm just someone doing a job I love. That's all any of us should get to do." But she knew the truth was more complicated. She was someone who'd refused to be made small. Someone who'd stood tall when the world demanded she kneel. Someone who'd turned humiliation into fuel for ascent. Before every flight, Maya touched the vintage wings her father had worn. 4 gold bars that represented more than rank. They represented perseverance, dignity, the refusal to let anyone else define your ceiling. "We fly for everyone who couldn't," she whispered to herself before pushing the throttle forward. "We fly for everyone who was told no. We carry them all." The aircraft lifted off the runway, piercing clouds, climbing toward the kind of sky her father had always promised existed if you were brave enough to reach for it. Below, the world looked small and distant. Up here, at 35,000 feet, where air was thin and horizons were endless, Maya Robinson was exactly where she belonged, flying free finally home. Grace under pressure is not about never feeling the weight. It's about carrying it with dignity until you're strong enough to fly above it. Captain James Robinson.